right. Hi again, folks. How are you doing? Mm-hmm. Slept okay? Somebody slept well, somebody didn't sleep that well. Wild guess. Yeah. All right. So, in my two previous sessions on this retreat, I've spoken about the tantric method and methodology, practices. But the two sessions that I've led have been from the absolute view, from the absolute perspective, or like I said, from the view from the top of the mountain, right? So there is a other view, like from the top of the mountain. What does it mean? It means that we perceive, we recognize ourselves as already enlightened beings, as Buddhas, as Mahasiddhas, which means that we tap, we discover, we recognize our already enlightened nature. And that's actually an important point, that we do not generate or create enlightened nature by practices. We only remove what is on its way. But the view from the mountain top means that um, we simply perceive and recognize ourselves as already enlightened beings, already liberated beings. And in that recognition, there is no notion of being liberated. There is no notion of freedom or delusion. Such notions don't are gone. Similarly, when we have cessations, we don't have a notion that, oh, now I'm enlightened. It just doesn't arise. Uh, or when you purify, perfect the 10 bhumis, and then reach the first stage, first type of full enlightenment, Buddhahood, you don't have the notion, you don't go around with the notion in your head, with the thought in your head that now I'm enlightened, now I'm enlightened, now I'm a Buddha. It just doesn't occur because yeah, you just don't have that thought. It doesn't arise. It's simply absence of such notions, absence of the notion of being deluded or being liberated. So I pointed out this from this absolute perspective, and like I said in one of those sessions, that I used a pointer that just drop your story, drop your notions about if your life has been a success or a failure, if you've been successful financially, as a parent, as a worker, whatever, or if you've been failure in those things. I asked you to completely just forget your story, snap out of your story, or snap out of being a human being. I think that, well, to me personally at least, I remember being a kid and well into my 20s, I often had this, I snapped out of being a human. Suddenly it felt like strange, like to be in a human body. Have you had the same? Put your hand up. I'm sure you will. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Easy to make a diagnosis for all of you. Everybody raises hand. So you have the same condition. But yeah, it is. It can be used. Not having not being a man or a woman. What happens is that when we are kids, especially people like us who have very strong, should I say, dharmic karma or spiritual karma, very strong spiritual inclinations and connections. When we are kids, we have such experiences when we snap out of the human experience, snap out of the whole being in this world of other human beings. Those moments of, should I say, like being disillusioned of human existence. But then, as years and decades go by, typically people get more and more, maybe I shouldn't say fixated, but kind of simply set into the groove of being a human, man, woman, having a profession, certain social relations, certain definitions, being defined in certain way. Isn't that the case? So, when we just follow certain routines, work routines, social routines, having kids and so on, you're so, or being immersed in work, you're so engaged in that you're only you have less time to relax, less time to contemplate, less time to snap out of your story. So we do get fixated in general. Very much my experience, through my marriages and having kids and health problems. So I can certainly say of my own behalf that I've experienced that. But also at the same time while being a practitioner. So maybe just to wrap this up, I don't mean to talk long because I have other plans but for this session. But so because of the way how our subtle body, how our energy body is built, there are areas in our subtle body that always remain pure. If you've studied with me for 1 or 2 years, have read my books, you have heard me discuss about the three, I wouldn't call them energy centers, but maybe I would say because they are not like energy centers like whirling wheels of energy, but kind of just areas that always remain pure. I think that the Taoist concept of Dantians was originally viewed like this. And I've actually received this teaching from one of my Mahasiddha gurus, who is a Dzogchen master, Vimalamitra, who I've taught this few times over the years, where these three centers inside the body are practiced in the way how I teach. But nowadays in Taoism, they don't really, the view about these three centers in the head, in the heart, in the belly are very different. And I think it has distorted in Taoist tradition and in Buddhist tradition, where they also use these centers. It has distorted over the centuries. But anyway, there are these, if you think of your own fist, there are these areas inside the head, in the center of the head, inside the heart, in the center of the chest, and inside the belly, inside the gut, right there in the center, these fist-sized areas that always remain pure. And so these are in Taoism known as the three Dantians. Dantien literally means cinnabar field or area of cinnabar. I don't know why it's called cinnabar, because cinnabar is some kind of like a dye, like I don't really even know what it's used for, but I guess I guess they chose that term because it has been something very precious or valuable. If you want to check out what cinnabar is, not cinnamon, but cinnabar. So maybe you'll figure out. Maybe I'll Google it myself. But so these three areas that always remain pure, three dantians, but then there's the fourth dantien, Mahasiddha Bhumis, above the whole karmic energy system, above the 10 bhumis that get stained and dirtied by self-based habits and patterns and formations. There's the Mahasiddha Bhumis, 11, 12 and 13, up there and down there. So there's the fourth Dantien, which is, it's the same Dantien, but it's the opposite poles of the energy body. So these 11, 12 and 13th are also here in these three inside the body. And you know, anybody can try to find and locate these three areas in the body. But the thing is that, you know, for example, myself, I spent 4 years in Zen practice practicing the lower center of those, the one in the gut, which is really widely practiced Zen meditation practice. And I never once discovered that center. Well, there are a couple of reasons for this. Like I said, that the view, the explanation of those centers in Zen Buddhism is not the same like I'm explaining it now. So it is viewed as a area or a place where you are to focus your mind and then gather chi or prana, accumulate energy there, which I think nowadays is pretty pointless. You know, we can gather energy in the belly or on the tip of our finger if we like. That's what Shaolin monks do, like monks who do these incredible martial feats, break bricks with their hands, or you know, have spears stick into their throats. That's how they do it. They gather, accumulate prana or chi through their willpower to these places, and then they're able to do those things. But from the dharmic perspective, in the context of getting awakened, such practices of accumulating chi or prana in the gut or anywhere else, I think it's pointless. What is, on the other hand, what the whole path is about, is to understand and experience, practically recognize that we have enlightened nature, and then remove obstacles that lie on the way of it, that hinder us from recognizing ourselves as fully enlightened Buddhas at all times, right? So yeah, my point was that there is this already pure, already sacred, fully sacred, not confused, not fragmented, not traumatized side of us that we have. So we have that in these three centers, and the fourth one that is split to two polar opposites at the end of the pillar. And then we have those, I don't know, 100,000 or so nadis, channels. And yesterday I mentioned it briefly during our session that nadis are like electrical lines. So this is my iPhone charger. So they are like electrical lines, and as you know, electrical lines have the outer layer but also the inner layer. So nadis also have inner and outer aspects, and the inner layer there remains pure always, while the outer layer is where the karmas, habits, patterns are kind of like stamped. Depends what kind of karma it is, because some karma, some habits and patterns are very loose, so it's like a light stamp. But some habits and patterns, and especially the older you get, the grooves, the stamp gets deeper, and so that's how it is. Those karmas, vasanas, samskaras are on the outer layer, and that's where the cleaning happens when we talk about purifying the 10 bhumis. But the reason why we are in this whole endeavor of awakening, of enlightenment, is because we have that pure side, pure aspect in the centers or areas as well as the nadis. If we didn't have that pure, then the view from the mountaintop would be pointless because we couldn't recognize it. Right? And people who are dharmically, spiritually mature, when we hear spiritual teachings, when we learn about awakening, enlightenment, Buddhahood, and so on, it instantly makes sense. Yes, that's what I want. That's what I've been looking for, isn't it? So we intuit that that is something very important, crucial to our living, and crucial to having a meaning in life. I think that everybody who are joining this retreat have received Rainbow Body Yoga Empowerment. I think so. By the way, if possible, keep your cameras on so that I can see you. And also please be on time for sessions. So I think everybody has Rainbow Body Yoga Empowerment, and the plans I had for my sessions on this retreat was to do a little bit of workshopping and tantric study about these energetics. I've been talking about nadis, meridians, view from the mountain top, but we also need to talk about view from the foot of the mountain, or if you have practiced some time and open and perfected a number of bhumis, then you are no longer at the foot of the mountain. You're already some distance on the way to the top. So while the view from the mountain top can be taken as a path, this is what Dzogchen is about. Mahasandhi, Great Perfection teachings are about. So, you don't deny that you have self-based habits and patterns. You don't deny them, but you just focus that you're already awakened, enlightened Buddha. And after you receive a direct introduction from a proficient teacher who can transmit it to you, show it to you, empower you in that way, then you simply somebody who practices Dzogchen, Great Perfection, can only keep returning to that recognition, and through that way, it is said traditionally that to take the result as a path, So you take the already awakened Buddha nature as your practice. So this is like practicing absolute view. But you know, Amrita Mandala, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong. But one does need to be careful, because careful with anything really. This doesn't only apply to Dzogchen, but also to Tantra, any type of practice, that we do need to be attentive and very careful about our notions, our conclusions. Because jumping into hasty or wrong conclusions can take lifetimes to fix. I remember I used to go to India. I haven't gone there in a number of years, but I used to meet this one yogi, go see him several times, and he once said that for common people, big mistakes are small mistakes, but for practitioners, small mistakes are big mistakes. Right? So we need to be careful, we need to be attentive about what we think and what we believe. We need to question ourselves, our own minds, and our conclusions until we have complete certainty about the way how we perceive things, how we see ourselves, what kind of decisions we make, what kind of things we, what kind of energy we have, right? Guru Rinpoche, there's also a famous quote from him where he says that as a master, he says that, I don't remember the exact quote, but it's about karma and how we need to be very, very attentive about our actions, especially as practitioners, because if we do something dumb, if we do something dumb as teachers, as instructors, as practitioners, it can take a long, long time. It can ruin our practice, our karmic connections with teachers and lineages and masters so fast. I've seen this happen, unfortunately, so many times during my teaching career, that people jump into dumb or hasty conclusions and create problems, and then completely ruin their good karmic connections. So, but it doesn't need to go that far, you know, that we come to burn bridges to teachers and sanghas and so on. But even the thing is that if there is even a tiny crack, we allow a crack to be there, a tiny hole in our boat, it will sink over time. Right? So we need to be very careful and attentive about what we think, what our conclusions are, what our views are. And in that, of course, you know, teachings, written teachings, recorded teachings help us to reset ourselves, reset our view, reset us being sincere and honest, committed, devoted. And of course, practice itself, you know, recognizing our own basic nature is the great resetter. But nevertheless, it still happens that practitioners stumble and really screw up their futures, not only for years or decades, but for lifetimes and many lifetimes. So yes, so relative, absolute view and absolute practicing the absolute view, and then relative view and relative practice, which in the case of our Sangha is tantric practice, not that much sutric. I always make jokes about sutric practice, uh, purposefully, not ill-intentioned jokes, but um, I make those well based on analysis really. But I think that myself saying those things has upset so many people. Um, but I haven't said any of those things to. I've simply spoken about my observations and my own experiences, because I very much have the experience that sutra or sutrayana practice is not as effective as tantric practice is. We have many people in our Sangha who have exactly the same experience. It is difficult for me, I think, incomplete. I guess you could say immature as a practitioner and as a teacher, because I have very hard time accepting that such a thing that, there is the notion that if you're not ready, then practitioners, they practice some lower level or sutra type practices until they become mature enough to start practicing tantra. I have a very hard time accepting that. But that's what many great lamas have said. So perhaps it is because of my own stubbornness, which I try to be very attentive about and very careful about. My stubbornness and my kind of like being a bit of a rebel, sometimes a hellraiser, that I like to question anything and everything. And that is also what we need to do. Questioning is perfectly fine, and being analytical is perfectly fine. We need to be analytical. That's what Shakyamuni said. That's exactly what Shakyamuni said. He said that to his students, that you need to analyze every word that I have said. But then Buddhists do exactly the opposite. So, but we do need to analyze. But being analytical is completely different than being a fundamentalist or being being rude or arrogant, thinking that one is analytical. I've had that experience so many times during my teaching career, because I'm a white guy and relatively young. So especially like older men, they have a problem with, older white men have a problem with studying younger white men. They have been very rude to me many times. But, it is what it is. I guess there is some truth to merit and readiness, that we aren't ready until we really feel the burn, feel the pain, because it forces us to step out of our notions that got us to that pain. Anyway, so Tantra. So Tantra is transformative practice. As you know, when you practice Guru Yoga, which is the most important tantric practice, when you practice deity yogas with different deities, it transforms us. Our energy changes over time. It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter how badly we've screwed up in different ways in our life. But when we start practicing Tantra, this pure basic nature starts coming out. So the person, the practitioner, the tantric completely changes. Samsaric beings don't change like that. Samsaric beings do not accidentally just change. It's the opposite. They get more and more fixated, more and more sunk into their negative habits and patterns as time passes. Isn't that so? So, there are many stories of ancient Mahasiddhas who are very dear to me. I'm a big fan of the Mahasiddhas. That term, Mahasiddha, comes from an era, the so-called Mahasiddha era, Mahasiddha period, when there has been many Mahasiddhas in India, and this was before Tantric yogas were brought to Tibet. This was before that, or partially during that. But the Mahasiddha era started in the greater area of India, perhaps what are now in other close countries, and it started around 3rd century or so, and then lasted for roughly 1,000 years. And this was a time when there was lots of exchange. There was no rigid notion of there being Buddhists and Hindus. That separation, like it is now, hadn't yet taken place. There were only different types of teachings, different dharmas, different teachings of reality, and one of those teachings was the Madhyamika philosophy, emptiness philosophy of the middle way. So there was Mahayana, Madhyamika, there were different what we could now call like Hindu theories of practice, and it was like a very open-minded, very innovative and openly sharing, openly working beyond the borders of certain traditions. Now it's completely opposite. For a long time has been, for 1,000 years has been, especially when, Tantric teachings went to Tibet, it has been compartmentalized and categorized and separated into different sects and schools and so on, up to the point that they have actually had bloody battles, feuds between schools of Buddhism in Tibet. They have actually slaughtered each other there, have used just crazy stories. You can study the history of Tibetan Buddhism, and it's the opposite of Mahasiddha era. Having said that, there has been lots of Mahasiddhas, lots of great practitioners coming from Tibet, but my point is that during the Mahasiddha era in Tibet, and then after several centuries, when Tantric teaching spread into Tibet and to other areas, it was a very healthy scene. Oh, wouldn't it be great to have a healthy Dharma scene? Wouldn't it be great to have a scene of Dharma, culture of Dharma, where people actually followed Shakyamuni's advice, or the advice that many other masters have said, that you don't have to be a believer, a dumb believer, but you have to analyze, and you have to be open-minded and open-hearted, and not become a blind follower and fundamentalist and rude towards others. Well, we can do our own share and do our best to have a sangha like that, and perhaps over time, during the decades ahead of us, try our best to show that spirit to others. So tantric practice is the tantra is often described as a path and method of transformation, transforming our self-based, self-centered existence, releasing that sense of self, me, I, mine, into this selfless basic state, and thus liberating us from these hooks that confine us, put us into prison. So in our method we practice both Buddhist design of Tantra, but also Hindu design of Tantra. So Buddhist design, like I mentioned before, it's really focused on getting to the end of the 10 bhumis, meaning establishing this wisdom experience, establishing pragya, wisdom, pragya wisdom, where all dualities have collapsed through seeing the basic nature of all things in the mind, different phenomena in the mind, things in the mind. No self in any thought, no self in any emotion, just pure experience. Very important point that doesn't mean to be without thoughts or to be without emotions. No, it's the opposite. You're thinking freely without the notion of self. You're feeling freely without the notion of self. This is the colors of the rainbow. You know, emotions, different types of emotions, radiating unobstructed and not dirtied by the sense of self. So pure emotions. So yeah, Buddhist Tantra is focused on that. And then there's the other energy body, the meridians, that the Hindu design of practice is much more suitable because I think it's simply much more effective, which means that it works faster, gets things done faster. And that is also important. There's a lot I could say about this, but on one hand, we cannot really focus on, we cannot, our motivation to practice cannot be that, okay, now I have 6 bhumis open, now I'm going to focus opening the 7th. Technically we can do that because, you know, in our lineage we have teachings where the different bhumi centers and their vibratory fields are, so you can kind of focus on it, but that cannot be the motivation. If you think in such a superficial way, you will never open the 7th. The motivation needs to be liberation for all beings and to benefit all beings. And then, you know, when you do these practices, then they start opening. It's kind of like a safety system, inbuilt safety system. Um, mm, so I was thinking, um, how many of you have received Amrita Sundari empowerment? I ask the opposite way. Is there somebody who has not received Amrita Sundari? Okay. There was also somebody requested Amrita Avalokiteshvara empowerment. And because I think all of you have Rainbow Body Yoga empowerment, so you already have the Buddhist Avalokiteshvara. But I was thinking of giving you Amrita Avalokiteshvara today, giving that empowerment, so that we could do some study and compare the two on the following days. Or at least that's my intention at this point. Might be completely different plans tomorrow. But so maybe I need to say a few words about Amrita deities. So, you know, to me there is nothing more precious than my gurus. And over the years, I've been extremely fortunate to not only to practice Guru Yoga with the masters of the Mahasiddha family, but also to receive teachings from many masters of the Mahasiddha family. And one of those gurus is Agastya. I've spoken about Agastya quite a bit recently because it's mainly him and Babaji that I've been working the past 2 years figuring out what light body is and how to get to light body after the whole Buddhist wisdom process. So you can Google Agastya, 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 and he has his own Wikipedia page. But Agastya he's a very, very special master because he has a position in Sanatana Dharma, in Hindu Dharma, like no other guru has. So when we speak of Hinduism, we speak of religion and schools and lineages and religions within religions that are practiced by almost 1 billion people, or practiced or non-practicing Hindus, but there's lots of Hindus. And Hinduism has 3 main branches, 3 main religions. So there is the Vishnu religion called Vaishnavism. Then there is the Shiva religion, Shaivism, Shaivites. And then there is the Shakti religion, the Divine Mother religion, Shaktism, or Shaktas, who practice it. And there is only one master who is considered a master by all these 3 streams, and that's Agastya. So, if we think logically that these 3 Hindu religions have been around for 10-15,000 years at least, and then you have a guru figure who is considered foundational, like a founder figure to these religions, you get some idea what kind of guru it has to be in that position and still be venerated today. So I've been speaking about energetic design in Tantra. Buddhism at large is designed in one way. Hinduism at large is designed in one way. And then, of course, we can look carefully inside Buddhist Tantra and kind of dissect it and analyze the energies, the charges, the empowerments, the transmissions under a microscope, just like we can do in Hinduism. Same thing can be done to Taoism, that has many esoteric traditions and so on. But I feel that I am extremely fortunate as Agastya's disciple and as a teacher, as a founder of this Sangha and this method, to have received this very special type of energetic design in Amrita deities. So at the moment there are maybe like 12 or 13 different Amrita deities, and I'm planning to give most of them openly. I don't know when yet, whether it will be next winter, but I've given few of them. I've given Amrita Sundari empowerment few times, 2-3 times I think, and then I gave Amrita Avalokiteshvara that I will give now in June. Last month. I think it was last month. On a retreat the first time. So I've been thinking how to explain this. Because yesterday I was speaking about the 6 realms of transmigration that Buddhism talks about. And I was speaking how Buddhas or Mahasiddhas are the only ones who are outside of those realms of transmigration. Nevertheless, even though this theory of 6 realms and liberated beings, I think, are shared by all Buddhists, all vehicles of Buddhism, there are practices in Buddhism that are actually Hindu practices that are still practiced like they always have been practiced in Hinduism, that Shakyamuni learned from his teachers and then passed on to his students and are still practiced today. I'm talking about jhanas. Jhana, jhana, meditative absorption. They are known as dhyanas I know they are practiced in Chinese Zen Buddhism. And for many years I didn't understand why the heck do Buddhists do these practices. Because meditative absorptions are practices where you cultivate godly experience, which is inside within the 6 realms. It's not the basic state that is cultivated in jhanas or dhyanas, meditative absorptions, but God realm, godly experiences, exalted states. And I didn't understand why the heck do they do this. It is said in about Shakyamuni Buddha that in the, what is it called, in suttas, that are the ancient historical records of Buddha's life and his teachings, it is said in many places that he taught jhanas, these meditative absorptions, to his students, the monks and people who followed him, for decades before he passed away. And the reason, by the way, why I was confused, why the heck would a Mahasiddha like Shakyamuni why would he teach that stuff? Because it was those practices that were a dead end to him, because they didn't make him pop out of the six realms, of the samsaric realms, but kept him, made his experience pleasant, godly, godlike, through being in those exalted, heavenly, godly states. But his fundamental problem didn't get solved. And yet, I couldn't understand for so long time why he then taught those practices. For, he lived over 40 years after his awakening. And then it is also said of him that when he died, he died practicing jhana. That he went from the first jhana, there are 8 states, 8 different meditative states, 8 jhanas. It is said that he practiced from the first to the 4th, meaning the grossest of the jhanas, to 4th, which is relatively subtle, and then he came back to the first meditative absorption and left his body and died like that. Why would a Mahasiddha practice for decades after his wisdom awakenings and teach practices of exalted consciousness, exalted states? I think the reason is that he realized that he needs to clean his meridians, what I call the meridian field, what Tibetans called, like I said, Bindu or Tigle. I think he was trying to do that. So, in my experience, I have never practiced jhanas within Buddhism, but I practiced a lot and taught Kriya Yoga. That is some of those states in 8 jhanas you can access through Kriya Yoga practice. The Kriya Yoga that I will start teaching again next month is significantly different because of Amrita deities. But my point is that it is an interesting thing. I'm kind of getting ahead of things a lot, but when we have traumatic experiences, like many of us are working at the moment, cleaning the meridian system, that we can heal those, at least some, maybe even most of those traumas through godly experience, through exalted states. This is my observation. I've listened to talks by jhana specialists. I can mention Leigh Brasington, who's American jhana teacher, as well as Tina Rasmussen. Tina Rasmussen is very special, I could say, because I don't know if she's still the only Westerner ever who has not only deeply trained in a Thai lineage in jhanas, but was and is able to stay in jhanas as she wishes. So she has mastered those jhanas, I guess you could say. But she also said that, even after being authorized to teach jhanas by his Thai teacher, Pa Auk Sayadaw, you can find Tina's interview from Guru Viking podcast. And there she says that, after she had practiced jhanas in that masterful skill she has, still after a long time, she's still working to remove traumas. I found her saying that extremely interesting. And then, just quite recently, I finally understood why Shakyamuni Buddha was practicing jhanas for all those decades and teaching jhanas. I think he understood that he needs to purify the meridians uh, that would take his enlightenment further than where it was through wisdom emptiness alone. So I think that lots of Hinduism, it basically teaches what the jhanas teach: exalted states, exalted heavenly experience, blissful experience. And nothing wrong with that when you understand that that's not all. This was very much my problem after Kriya Yoga, because it was lovely after years of very rigorous and hard and macho Zen practice to just bathe in this bliss and one type of love, and this be in this heavenly experience. But then I realized after doing that for thousands of hours that it doesn't solve the problem that I have. So I was practicing Kriya Yoga a number of years before my first Bhumi opening. So this was prior to 2011. But I had the same problem as Shakyamuni. And then I had an awakening, and I realized that, oh, there's something not matching here, or there's something I haven't been told about the whole process. There's something I don't understand. But now, 12 years later, I understand. So most of Hinduism, like those jhanas, most of Hindu Tantra works with those exalted godly states. And they can heal, I think, completely heal traumas. I think they can completely open up the meridian system, thus returning the meridian system and the physical body to its original pristine purity. Of course, if we talk about light body or rainbow body, then it automatically means that you have to have both energy bodies, both nadis and meridians completely purified, completely perfected. But my point is that I think one can practice jhanas and then completely purify the meridian system. Shakyamuni didn't manage to do that, by the way. But I think it is possible. So Amrita deities. So Amrita deities, we have Amrita Sundari, which is, Sundari is like a Shakti, form of Divine Mother. Then we have Amrita Shakti, then we have Amrita Shiva, and bunch of others that are versions of these very classic Hindu deities from Shaiva and Shakta traditions. But the thing is that because of Agastya's utmost kindness, they are not exactly the same as if you went to a most Hindu lineages and asked for a Shiva empowerment, because it's Amrita Shiva or Amrita Shakti, Amrita Sundari. It's different in design. So what that Amrita component does there is that it not only generates that healing, godly exalted state, but it also keeps breaking it. Not breaking like forcing it, hurting it, but it keeps popping it open. And that leads to cessations. Instead of having to go into that state and marinate in that state for long periods of time, the Amrita deities, they generate that state, but at the same time pop it open, keep popping it open. Much like, exactly like dynamic concentration practices, physical dynamic concentration in Rainbow Body Yoga. So there is that same principle of popping the whole energy system open, in this case the meridian system open. And this is only because of Agastya's, I wouldn't even say it's kindness, because it is so much more. You know, we have to understand that also Guru Rinpoche's kindness, because he's the one who has given and designed the Buddhist deities of Rainbow Body Yoga. It is not common at all to have a Sangha where people just keep having Bhumi events and keep perfecting Bhumis within few short years. It just doesn't happen in the world. It is unheard of that there is a lineage or a school where practitioners can perfect 10 Bhumis or perfect 13 Bhumis and then start working on their light body and have their light body perfected in a matter of some years. We have to see how long it takes. But we have, what is it, 15, 16, 17 people who've perfected 10 Bhumis in 2 to 6 years. That's unheard of. That's unheard of in the yogic culture today. Yeah. But anyway, it is because of the... It is because of our gurus why that's possible for us. Yeah. So, let's continue with Amrita Avalokiteshvara empowerment.